A 64-year-old man with a pension and a divorce behind him wrote exactly why he would never let another woman into his life and ended the entire comment with a single word: relief. In this video, I'm going to show you why thousands of older men are making exactly the same decision and why the life everyone said they would regret is the one they are fighting to protect. They don't feel lonely. They aren't bitter. They wake up every morning to a life that finally belongs to them. Later in this video, I'm going to share a comment that got over 1,000 likes in 24 hours from a man who summarized the whole financial reality of this choice in a single sentence. I'm also going to tell you about a man who spent decades being rejected by women and came to understand that every one of those rejections was actually the hand of God keeping him on the right path. Because the story you've been told about men living alone is totally false. And brother, by the end of this, you'll know exactly why. Do you know what the funny thing is? Nobody talks about the moment it actually happens. Not the divorce nor the breakup, but the moment inside your own head when something just stops. You wake up one morning and the first thing you think about is what you want for breakfast. Not her mood, nor what you forgot to do, nor the conversation you've been putting off for 3 weeks. Just breakfast. You lie there for a second thinking, wait, when did this stop being the norm? That is the moment. That is where this starts for most of these men. No big explosions, no dramatic exits. Just a quiet Tuesday morning where you realize your own head was finally yours again and how good it felt. That told you everything about how bad things had gotten. Once you feel it, you can't go back to pretending it isn't so. Something shifts and it doesn't go back. Now, this is what these men will tell you. The ones who have been living like this for 5 years, 10 years, or more, they don't describe it as a loss. They describe it the way you describe getting out of a car after a 12-hour drive. That sigh, that moment when you stretch your legs and think, I didn't realize how cramped I was. Because nobody told them this was on the other side. Nobody sat down with them and said, look, if you stop trying to fit into something that was never built for you, what you find is an emptiness. It's simply your life. That life that doesn't require you to be a smaller, quieter, and more carefully edited version of yourself every day just to keep the peace. That is what they found. And every one of them will tell you the same thing. They wish they had found it sooner. But here is the part that nobody talks about. This wasn't free. There was a real price. Before you can understand why the other side feels like this, you need to understand what it actually cost these men to get there. You know what? Nobody ever asks when they tell you to try again. When they say the right person is waiting for you. When your sister gives you the speech about companionship. Nobody ever stops to ask what you have already given away. Nobody sits down with you to do the math. It's the 30 years of working 50 hours a week. Not because you loved it, but because that's what you agreed to when you said, I do. You were the provider, the one who fixed everything. The guy who came home exhausted and still had to figure out what was wrong before taking off his shoes. You managed her moods, navigated her emotions, walked on eggshells over minds that you didn't set. And somehow it was never enough. You used to go to the racetrack on Saturdays. You had your numbers, your buddies. You spent 3 hours at the betting shop watching the races with a coffee and the racing form without anyone needing anything from you. That stopped around the 4th year. Too much to do. Wrong priorities. You let go. Most of you let something go. Imagine this. It's a Tuesday. You're in the parking lot at work at 5:45. You've been sitting there for 20 minutes. Not because you forgot anything, but because you're not ready to go inside the house yet. The inside of your car is the quietest place in your life right now. You know that the second you cross that door, the evening will start managing itself. You sat in that parking lot. Maybe not that exact one, but you know the feeling. You watch couples in restaurants and realize that you never actually had that. Not in 30 years of trying. The decisions, where to live, how to spend vacations, which friends were acceptable. Most were made her way. Not because she was right, but because peace was easier than the fight. This is what kills me, because I hear it every day from the mouths of men in these comments. You gave support and received silence. You showed up during her crisis, and she disappeared during yours. You spent decades being a little less than yourself in your own home because the full version of you generated too much friction for the situation. Some of you did this for 30 years and called it love. What the men who left understand now is that it wasn't love. It was work, a constant, invisible, and unpaid job. And the only salary was the right to keep doing it tomorrow. Someone left a comment on one of our videos under the name RetSoul61 and said something that stopped me cold. Solitude doesn't require feeling lonely. Peace and silence don't require boredom. There is the entire argument. RetSoul61 gave relationships multiple chances, saw the same patterns repeat every time, and finally stopped asking, when are you going to find the right one, and started asking, what am I actually looking for? When he sat with that question, honestly, the answer wasn't another relationship. It was what he already had. His dog, his routines, a Tuesday afternoon that belongs entirely to him. He realized something that most men spend their whole lives chasing and never reach. Clarity and the right to decide how their own days pass. I'll tell you something that captures all of this better than anything I've ever read came from a man in our community who spent his whole life being ignored. And what he discovered about every woman who passed him over will chill you. That will come in a few minutes. But first, because people always get this wrong, society presents this choice as a failure, as what happens when something went wrong or when you couldn't make it work. The focus is always on deficit, always about what you're missing. But the men who live it will tell you something different. The ones who seem broken are not the ones sitting quietly in their own homes on a Saturday night, eating what they want and sleeping without anxiety. The broken ones are those barely holding on in marriages that stopped working 8 years ago, checking the temperature of the house before saying a word, spending more energy on managing the relationship than living their own life. The older man who chose solitude didn't give up. He did something harder. He took an honest look at what a relationship was actually costing him, compared it to what he had been told it was worth, and made a decision. He chose himself, perhaps for the first time in a long time. Now listen to this because this captures it better than anything I could say. Someone commented on one of our previous videos under the name Paranormal Pat. He is 60 years old, never married. He spent his entire working life building his finances, his independence, a life that actually belonged to him. While he did that during his 30s, 40s, and 50s, women who had not been interested when he had nothing became very interested once he had something. He knows exactly why. He sees it clearly and is not bitter about it. He left a comment that made the whole community stop. He said, "Their rejection was God's protection." Read that again. Their rejection was God's protection. That is not something a bitter man says. A bitter man has a list of grievances and wants you to hear every one of them. That phrase comes from a completely different place. It comes from a man who has had enough distance, enough time, and enough perspective to look back at the full arc of his life and see that the closed doors were actually what kept him free. Every woman who passed him over, every relationship that fell apart, every time they ignored him for someone flashier, it was all protection against decades of emotional labor, of funding someone else's lifestyle, of the slow reorganization of oneself that happens in relationships that don't fit. He didn't lose anything. He was being saved for something better. That is wisdom of the kind that only comes from living long enough to see the full arc. Once that clarity settles in, once you have done the emotional math and made your peace with it, something else comes into focus. Something practical that these men don't talk about in public, but absolutely think about in private. Money. One of the men in our community said something that achieved more than 1,000 likes in less than a day. It's incredible how little money I need when I don't have a woman in my life. 1,000 people liked it because 1,000 people knew exactly what he meant. He wasn't complaining. He was genuinely surprised. Nobody tells you this part. Nobody sits down with you and explains what the financial side of solitude is really like. Not the scary version they use to keep you in line, but the real one. When you remove a partner from the equation at 60 or 65, something happens to your finances that most men aren't prepared for. They become simpler and lighter. Not because you're stingy, but because the overhead that came with the relationship quietly disappears. You don't realize how much it was costing you until it's no longer there. Think about what really changes. There isn't a second person's lifestyle to fund, nor vacations chosen according to their preferences, nor events to attend out of obligation, nor gifts for people you barely know. That slow financial drift toward expenses that serve the relationship instead of serving your real life stops. There's a man in our community with a $15,000 a month pension who could live extremely well. He told us that he had been spending nearly $3,000 of that each month on the relationship. Dinners out, trips she chose, gifts for her family, and general financial maintenance. When he stepped back, those $3,000 didn't disappear. They went elsewhere. He has been to Portugal twice and spent 6 weeks in Southeast Asia since then. Not because he got rich, but because he stopped paying a tax that brought him no benefit. That story is not unusual. The figures vary, but the calculation is always the same. Subtract the person spending your money, and suddenly there is money. These men are not depriving themselves. They are redirecting. Every dollar that used to go toward maintaining a relationship is now building something that really belongs to them. At 60, 65, or 70 years old, when the runway is defined and every year counts, the financial clarity that comes with solitude is one of the most underrated advantages these men have. They know exactly what they have, exactly where it's going, and no one is negotiating with them about it. Leave a comment below if you felt a shift. I want to know how that financial clarity felt the first time you truly experienced it. Now, here's the question that everyone asks next. If you've made this decision, you've heard it 100 times. People will ask you if you feel lonely. They ask it as if they already know the answer, as if they couldn't imagine a man who is alone and is not suffering. Let me tell you what you are not missing. You're not missing the drama, the fights that arose out of nowhere because someone was bored or anxious or needed to prove something. You're not missing the argument that wasn't actually about what it was about or the apology that was accepted but never quite forgotten. You are not missing the surveillance. The questions about where you have been, who you were talking to, or why you look distracted. The feeling of being watched in your own home. The emotional labor has also disappeared. Scanning the room before crossing your own front door, measuring every word, walking on eggshells in a space that you paid for. All of it has disappeared. Also gone is the slow reorganization. The hobbies that were pushed aside, the friends that drifted away, the interests that never developed because there was no room for them in a life reconstructed around someone else. You remember all of it in the same way you remember something that used to cost you everything. Here is what replaced it. Imagine this instead. Saturday morning, no alarm. You wake up when you wake up. You make the coffee exactly how you want. You sit where you feel like sitting, and then you just decide. Maybe you pick up the racing form and go to the betting shop or go to the casino and play Keno for a few hours. Maybe you call Frank and Eddie and the card game is in someone's garage tonight and you're in. Where you simply do absolutely nothing. And that is also fine because no one is keeping score. The point is that it is yours the whole day. No one negotiating what it looks like. No one making you feel guilty for how you spend it. No one turning your Saturday into their Saturday. These men got their friends back. They got their routines back. The things they let go of over the years. The racetrack, the card nights, the long walks, the lottery numbers they've been playing since 1987. They got them back not because those things are profound, but because they are theirs. Mornings that open up clean. Afternoons where you return to the same house you left. No storm waiting behind the door. No performance to rehearse while you pull up the driveway. Just the space as you left it. Quiet. Yours exactly as it should be. U.S. Census data shows that the percentage of men between 65 and 74 who live alone has nearly doubled since 1970. And this is what research keeps finding. These men are not falling apart. They're not isolated. They're mostly healthy. They're connected with people they chose themselves. And by their own accounts, they're doing better than the men in their circles who stayed in situations that had stopped working years ago. That is no coincidence. That is what happens when a man stops spending his energy on what he shouldn't. The men who know this, who have actually lived both sides, wake up every morning in a house that is exactly as they left it. And they feel something that took some of them a while to name correctly. Grateful. Now, this is the part nobody warns you about, the judgment. It comes from everywhere. From your family, from married friends, from women who don't know you, but somehow have opinions about your life. It sounds like concern, but it feels like an attack. Your sister says, "Don't you want companionship?" Your colleague at work, The one who looks exhausted every Monday because his wife spent the weekend putting him through an emotional obstacle course, looks you straight in the eye and says, living alone is no life. And you stand there thinking, brother, I'm watching your misery in real time, and you're telling me I'm the one with the problem. This is what is actually happening. People who are trapped in something feel uncomfortable around people who are not. Your freedom does not inspire them. It threatens them. Because if you can walk away and be genuinely better off, what does that say about their decision to stay? Your peace is a mirror they didn't ask to look into. Every time they see you on a Tuesday afternoon with no obligations and no drama, something in them shifts a little. That shift is not your responsibility, but they will try to make it yours. Don't let them. So, the real question is, what did they choose instead? Not just what they left behind, but what they built in its place. Everyone presents it as a loss, as a surrender. The story of a man who tried, didn't succeed, and settled for what was left. They have it completely backward. The men who have been living this long enough to have real perspective do not describe a subtraction. They built something deliberate, a life shaped around their own priorities, their own pace, their idea of what a good day actually is. You already heard from Kenneth at the beginning of this video. A divorce behind him, pension secured, about to retire. He wrote, I will never let anyone in again. Sad, but that's how it works. And then he added something that most people would miss. He said it wasn't sadness he felt when he wrote that. It was relief. That word relief is the one that keeps appearing. Not happiness, not freedom, not pride, relief. The specific feeling that something heavy has finally been let go. Then there's the story of a man who stayed. He has been married for 40 years and mentioned that he and his wife have kept completely separate finances since year 5. Separate accounts, separate financial lives within a shared home. He is still there, still in it. And at the end of the comment, he wrote a single word. Smile. Just smile. Like a man who realized something soon enough to protect it. Who found a way to stay in the situation without giving everything away, and 4 decades later discovers that it deserves a quiet smile. These men are not sad. They're not faking it. They're not waiting for someone to come along and make them change their minds. They're finished. Not because they're broken or bitter, but because they finally understand that what they have built is worth more than anything anyone ever offered them in exchange. What does it actually look like when a man finally chooses himself? It means the morning coffee is yours. It means your money goes where you decide, not to your mother-in-law's latest emergency or a vacation you didn't want. It means when you want to go play your numbers, you go play your numbers. It means your weekends, they're not broken. They're the cess people in the room. If you've already made this decision, you know it. You know how that first quiet morning felt. You know what it's like to check your bank account and not brace yourself for the worst. And if you are right now on the edge of it, afraid of what people will think, look at Kenneth. Look at Paranormal Pat. It feels like peace, brother. Put your age in the comments and tell me what your life is like now or what you want it to be. And if you know a man who needs to hear this, send it to him. If this story changed the way you see the quiet life of a man who has finally found his peace, subscribe and like the channel. We're bringing to light the truths that society often tries to bury. Let's build a future where your time and your peace are yours. The next chapter of our shared story will open.